The city and county of Honolulu gets some of its money back on a controversial contract over rail, but it's a victory not necessarily being publicized by city leaders. Here to explain is civilbeat.com editor John Temple. Good morning, John.
Good morning.
So Ansaldo, the contractor, and the state have reached a settlement now, but the interesting thing is when the release was made. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, it was kind of incredible at 7:22 on Friday night, a time when you try to hide bad news or news you don't like. The state put out a press release saying they'd reached a $150,000 settlement with Ansaldo because it turned out that the Italian company, when it bid for the Honolulu rail contract, did not have a license, a contractor's license in Hawaii, as is required by law. And by the way, the fine could have been as much as $560 million. So Ansaldo got off lightly, and it turned out they weren't even playing by the rules when they bid on the rail contract.
Wow, and it's a story that a lot of people didn't know about because that news release was so late on Friday. Let's move on to another story. Let's talk about those protest rules for APEC. You know, the Honolulu Police Department, as you have reported, has been accumulating a lot of different tools to use if there is a big protest, like pepper spray and other sorts of things. What are the rules that police use, and when will they use it?
Well, after we saw that they had been buying all this new what they call less lethal and non-lethal equipment, we asked for their use of force rules, and they provided them to us, but they were heavily redacted. But what was clear, and what is clear from them, is that they have been updating them to prepare for the protests and to give guidance. And it turns out, even though we have free speech rights as American citizens, the police obviously also have rights and have guidance about when to use force, and you can read those on our site because they've been updated. A lot has changed since 2003, which is the date of that policy.
All right, a lot of preparations for APEC. And finally this morning, John, you have an interesting article about the governor's new communications director after all of this shakeup in his office. And he's actually written a book about Vietnam.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Jim Bursma, the new communications director, wrote a book that was just published this summer called Loveless in the Nam. And it's the first of 4 books in a series. So Jim has a real colorful past. He's a retired Army colonel. So he's a person of, some accomplishment, obviously, and has written his own book. And, of course, he did serve in the infantry in Vietnam. And he has this in common with the governor, that both of them have written novels.
Well, very interesting, and definitely a new direction in the governor's communication side. Thank you so much, John Temple from Civil Beat.
Great to be with you.
And you can find the complete story that we just discussed on civilbeat.com. The time now is 6:38.